Thanks, Sarah. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first Monash Partners Consumer and Community Involvement Lunchtime Seminar. We're really excited to be hosting this seminar today. It's our very first, and it's being brought to you by the Monash Partners Consumer and Community Involvement team, and I'm delighted to be joined by Darshini Aiton, Sandy Braff and Sarah Carmody. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we're standing, and in the spirit of reconciliation, I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. We extend respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today. Wherever you are, we acknowledge and pay respects to our First Peoples. Welcome everybody. We just wanted to give you, next slide, thank you Sarah, a very quick overview of our program today. The idea of these sessions that they'll provide you with some practices, principles, frameworks and resources to support you in your consumer and community involvement activities, and consistent with the purpose of Monash Partners, which is to connect researchers, clinicians and community to innovate for better health. On our meeting today, we have people from various hospitals, research organisations and consumers all joining this meeting. The idea is that we learn from each other, ask questions and explore topics of interest. We wanted to let you know that today's seminar is being audio and video recorded. We will also save the chat and monitor the chat throughout the meeting, and in a few days' time we'll send you a summary of the key points also. We'll also post the recording on our website so it's widely available as a resource to everybody. Next slide, thanks Sarah. Just an overview of the program for today's first seminar. I'm going to make just a few opening comments and then I'm going to hand over to Sandy Braff, who's one of our Monash Partners Consumer and Community Involvement Research Fellows. Sandy's going to talk to us about the why of consumer and community involvement. Following on from Sandy, Dash, also one of our CCI Fellows, is going to talk about the how and talk about some models and how people use consumer and community involvement. And then Sarah, who's done a lot of work as our project manager for our consumer and community involvement platform, is going to talk about using online technology to support consumer and community involvement, something that we've all had to adapt to very much in the last 12 months with COVID. We'll allow some time at the end, about 20 minutes or so, for discussions and questions, and then we'll follow up with a quick summary, and also we would be very interested to get your thoughts about today's session and whether it's been valuable for you. Next slide, thank you Sarah. Just to point out, Monash Partners as a partnership of 12 research, teaching and health service organisations has prioritised consumer and community involvement, and we've established an enabling support platform to support people in doing this. We have free online training and resources. There's 6 self-paced modules. They sit on the Monash Partners website and they're freely available to all. We also offer advice and support to healthcare professionals and researchers across the Monash Partners network. And if you send us an email at cci@monashpartners.org.au, we'll be delighted to assist you. We also have on our website an extensive suite of resources, including some tip sheets, which guide you in how to use some of the technology platforms that are available at the moment. And of course, this lunchtime seminar series, which we're really pleased to launch today. We want today to be a really welcoming, create a really welcoming online space. So if you haven't already done so, please say hello in the chat, ask questions, please share your thoughts and experiences throughout the seminar. The Monash Partners team will be monitoring them and will provide some responses. We've got people from very diverse stakeholder groups on our discussion today, so we would just ask everyone that they be respectful of the diverse experiences and opinions of the people joining us. Please, if you drop out, you're having technology issues, we know it can be very challenging, let us know and we'll help. And also, we'd really importantly be very keen to hear your thoughts about today's seminar, and we'll provide just a very brief survey at the very end, which should only take about a minute or so of your time, and that feedback will be invaluable to us as we plan this series of seminars for 2021 and beyond. Thank you, Sarah. I'm now going to hand over to Sandy Braff, and Sandy is going to present to us around the why of consumer and community involvement. Thanks, Sandy, over to you.
No worries. Thanks, Angela. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm assuming you can hear me okay, and I'll just keep going, hoping that you can. So as Angela's pointed out, I'm going to talk to you about the why of consumer and community involvement and its benefits. I expect I'm already speaking to a group that knows a little bit about consumer and community involvement, and that's perhaps why you're at the session. So I'll keep it brief and reaffirm, I hope, some beliefs that consumer and community involvement is a very important and worthy investment. So as a sort of definition of consumer and community involvement, you can see that there's one there on the PowerPoint slides. Sorry, could you go to the next slide, please, Sarah? But you can see the most important components of it are highlighted with some key words there. And I guess the take-home message from that is that it is much more than just simply participation or just taking part, that there's meaningful, active partnerships with shared focus where trust and respect and commitment are all developed. So when we're thinking about, oh, sorry, still on the other slide, Sarah, thanks. Who the consumers and community are, well, obviously it's going to depend on the project, the research and the context, but I guess what's important is remembering to include diverse consumers and community in whatever activity or research you undertake, that it's very important to include different communities with different perspectives and approaches. Thanks, Sarah. So this slide is just highlighting that there is a plethora of terminology around this space, and it changes country to country, and it changes even within our own country as well a little bit. Some terms are very similar, some are very different, but I guess it is important to highlight that certainly countries like the UK, Canada, US that have actually spent a lot of time investing in consumer and community involvement, it's important to know the terms they use. And in the UK, it's patient and public involvement, or PPI, and in the US and Canada, they tend to refer to patient-orientated research. If you ever need a list of different terms, Dash and I have certainly done some work on some lit reviews, and we'll be more than happy to share those if anyone needed them. So why do we do consumer and community involvement? Well, there's a number of really good reasons. And one is that there's a really strong moral argument for it. In all fairness, people who use publicly funded healthcare and systems that directly affect and concern them really have a right to be involved in healthcare processes and research. The outcomes of research and projects can have really direct impacts on the treatments available to them, their efficacy, as well as the quality of services. So there should be opportunities made available for community members to have input, to feel included and valued and heard. Using consumer and community involvement in our research or healthcare improvement activities can help keep us quite accountable. Keeps our work transparent and available to the stakeholder. And this is particularly important for reasons I've just outlined, but also because it's often tax-funded funds that are being used to conduct the projects and research. Transparency is also really important, obviously, from ethical and economic guidelines, and reassurance that resources are being used efficiently and effectively. Consumer and community involvement can also keep research very relevant. It can help researchers or healthcare professionals to focus their questions, to keep them, to make sure they're addressing issues relevant to patients, consumers and the community, keeping them at the centre of their work. So consumers can inform researchers and healthcare professionals what it is they need, what's most important, their immediate challenges and obstacles, and how, and they've often got solutions on how to improve the situations as well. So it can be quite invaluable for developing research questions and informing priorities, processes and activities for impact. And finally on that slide, there's also growing evidence of consumer and community involvement as a very effective activity. It can lead to improved health outcomes as well as the cost and quality of research and projects. And ultimately there's a lot more to effectiveness there, but we're certainly in a space that we're developing a lot of tools to actually measure that effectiveness. So I'm pretty confident more will come out regarding that. Next slide, thanks Sarah. This is a quote, a long one, which I'll let you read, taken from a study that Dash and I conducted to look at some barriers and facilitators for consumer and community involvement. And ultimately it sums up, I think, the imperative and importance of CCI. It highlights the message that when we're getting multiple voices and input into developing projects and research, that it's really important that the consumer and community is one of those voices. Next slide, please, Sarah. This is just one paper, but there's many out there that highlight a lot of issues that go on in research. This one in particular is highlighting a lack of advancement in a particular area of healthcare related to problems with clinical trials. And I think certainly this paper and others, it just highlights the space that is available for consumer and community involvement to make a big difference. You know, examples such as helping to shape appropriate interventions for clinical trials, assisting with recruitment, designing participant information, just to name a few. Next slide, thanks Sarah. Also, there's recognising the importance of consumer and community involvement, there's increasing mandatory requirements for it to receive health research funding these days. So certainly, you know, the NHMRC, MRFF, NDIS, Monash Partners, Heart Foundations, any research to do with cancer and survivorship, they all expect consumer and community involvement to be written into any research or project funding made available, and that it be integrated throughout. There's also the expectation in some journals that consumers are either co-authors or reviewers of manuscripts. Next slide, thanks Sarah. So there's benefits for all from multiple perspectives. So from a community perspective, just summing up, the community are better informed and have greater understanding when they're involved in research and healthcare projects. It enhances public confidence in research, and as I've mentioned, keeps it relevant, meaningful and very applicable. And as this rapid review, the picture there shows that it can actually lead to improved healthcare processes as well as healthcare outcomes. So important from a community perspective. Next slide, thanks Sarah. But also from a consumer perspective, again another quote from our project, that highlights that consumers can get benefit from giving back or feeling they're making a contribution to a better system that perhaps, you know, has gone well or not so well for them. They can feel they can influence processes and make them more patient-centred. And it just helps them feel valued for their lived experience. It also provides an opportunity for personal skill and knowledge development, so they can learn about how healthcare systems work. They can be exposed to new opportunities like presenting at a conference, and they can also meet a lot of like-minded people working in the area, or other consumers indeed. And last slide, thanks Sarah. There's also obviously a lot of benefits for the researcher too. So researchers can feel confident that they're addressing community needs and priorities, that it can be incredibly rewarding to build trusting, enduring relationships, that rapport can develop and satisfaction from work can be derived. So involving consumers and community can remind us why research is being conducted. It can keep us very motivated and inspired. It can help people to think from a new angle as well and stimulate research or project questions, and ultimately ensure that any project or research we do is fit for purpose. So if consumer and community have involvement in research designs, interventions, recruitment, there can be greater study effectiveness, completion, as well as translation and impact. Over to you, Dash.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Darshini Aiton, and so amazing to see so many of you online today with us this afternoon. So I'm going to talk to you about the how of consumer and community involvement. And to do that, I'm actually going to use a case study of a project I've been involved in called the Bro Support Project. And so I'll use this case study to show you and demonstrate how consumer and community involvement can be used throughout a project cycle. And I've put a picture up here, which is from the artist Fern Siebler, and you can see gold leafing throughout this painting. So in a similar way that consumer and community involvement needs to have consumers involved through each process and phase of a project cycle, gold leafing in this painting is showing the same thing. So not just the beginning, not just the middle, not just the end, but throughout. And I'm hoping Bro Support will kind of give you a bit of an indication as to how we can do that. Next slide, Sarah. So I'm going to structure our presentation today across this project cycle, which has been put up by Involve, who are like the peak patient and public involvement body in the UK. And we'll talk through each of these different stages. And so the text in orange is a little bit of a definition of what that looks like and what it should include. And then I'll give you an example from the Bro Support project. So next slide, Sarah. So just some background to begin with, because you're probably all wondering what on earth does Bro Support stand for. So Bro Support was a project that aimed to design, build and test a patient portal, hence the port part, for men with prostate cancer, hence the Bro part. And it was to provide information to men that was tailored for the treatment that they'd undergone, the stage of their cancer, their age, and their side effects. So that's the support component of that title. So that name also was endorsed by the consumers involved in this project. And this project was funded by VAHI, the Victorian Agency for Health Information. And the first thing I want to draw your attention to is the Bro Support team. So we have a project team. Our principal investigator is Professor Sue Evans, who's at the Cancer Council. And you can see a number of us there. Take note, we have Jeremy Miller as a clinical lead and Ben Shamish as a honours student, but the rest of the project team, female, okay? Keep that in your mind as we go through. We have a steering committee that had 2 consumers, and also the excellent input and guidance of Katrina Lewis, who is at the Alfred Health and is the lead patient experience and consumer experience coordinator. We also had representatives from Movember, VAHI, the Urological Society from the Australian New Zealand group, and IT reps because it was a web portal. We had a consumer advisory group that had 3 consumers plus some project team reps and also Katrina, and we also had a research advisory group. So next slide, Sarah. So I'm not going to spend too much time going into the detail of this slide, but what I wanted to kind of put out there was this was the project process, and it involved what we call a lot of co-design workshops. And if you are interested in co-design, please come along to our next month's seminar, who we have someone coming to talk about particular approaches to co-design, Gabrielle Brand. But what we mean by co-design and why we use this in this project is very consumer-centric. So we were working with and engaging with men with prostate cancer and health professionals throughout the design and the development process of Bro Support, rather than just asking them for feedback at the end and when we'd already developed the protocol. So next slide. So if we go back to that project cycle, identifying and prioritising and commissioning, this was a project that was identified through PCOR Vic and funded by VAHI, so the Prostate Cancer Outcome Registry for Victoria, because what we realized, or what they realized, was basically men in the registry who had prostate cancer were filling out surveys around their urinary, bowel and sexual outcomes, but there was no way for them to receive information if they were experiencing challenges, or to receive feedback about where they were in relation to other men who also had prostate cancer. So this was identified as a patient or consumer need, and something that was relevant and was going to help in terms of navigating health systems, accessing care, and providing support. So for example, if a man reported leaking or dripping urine, is there a way to then be able to link him into Incontinence Australia, or to advise him to see a continence physiotherapist? So that's where we were starting from. Next slide. Designing and managing. So involving consumers in the design and management of your project helps to make sure your project is relevant, that it is important, that it's appropriate, that it's acceptable, that it's accessible, and it also helps in terms of understanding the feasibility of some of the approaches that you might be taking. So we had our consumer advisory group, and we had 5 meetings across the 12 months, and these were so incredibly important. So they reviewed our protocols. So just to remind you, we had 3 consumer members, and they had lived experiences of prostate cancer, highly active in the community. And we also had Katrina Lewis and us as a project team. So our consumers reviewed the project protocol, and they reviewed each of our workshop activities that we were going to run, gave us feedback on what types of activities we were running, the language we were using, the timing of the activities. And so as an example, we were talking about symptoms or challenges as being normal. And they said, well, that language isn't probably really great to use, maybe use the word usual. So getting feedback around those types of things. And then we had our consumer workshops. So that was 6 co-designed workshops that ran from June to August 2020, sorry. And the consumers were involved through these workshops of co-designing this portal. So next slide, Sarah. We used what we called a double diamond co-design approach. And so worth Googling if you haven't seen this, and it's a process of going through discovering what's important, what is relevant, defining that, developing it, and then delivering it. And so at the end of these workshops, we would have a portal that was co-designed, relevant, appropriate, and acceptable to our consumer group. Next slide. And so then again, this is how we kind of narrowed it down. And these are the 6 workshops. And so one of the things that we really wanted feedback from our consumer groups before we did anything was, what about these activities? Are they making sense? The River of Life is quite a complex activity. How are people going to understand that? How do we do workshop 3A and 3B? You can see we've got 2. That was because we had a conversation with our consumers. Should we have partners involved throughout? Or should we have partners in a separate workshop? Or should we have them combined? And so we had advice that 3A would be men on their own, and 3B would be men with their partners if they wanted their partners involved in that section. And that was all recommended by our consumer advisory group. Next slide. So then undertaking the project. So involving your consumers in gathering and reviewing data and evidence. So we had our consumers from the advisory group co-facilitating the workshop. So as I highlighted before, the majority of the project team were female. We don't have a lived experience of prostate cancer. And so to be able to have our consumers be able to demonstrate some of our workshop activities, co-facilitate some of that discussion, meant that that created a space that was safe and welcoming, and also were able to provide insights that we weren't able to in those conversations. So I mentioned our River of Life, which was really about trying to understand the journey of prostate cancer, where there was calm waters, where there were rough waters, where there were trees and boulders and things that were happening in that journey. And so one of our consumers from the advisory committee demonstrated his first to show them, this is what we're thinking about doing, and inviting them to participate. They also, our consumer advisory committee, we met with after each workshop to present the results back and get their ideas and sense making about what had been said and their interpretation. And so we'd present something and they'd say, look, this is why people were saying that. This is what they were trying to understand and get at. And it meant that we could then refine our future workshops based on that feedback, and it was invaluable. Next slide, Sarah. So dissemination is really important. Once you've done a project, or when you're doing a research project or a healthcare improvement project, how are you putting that information out to your consumers in the community? And so our consumers were very involved in recruitment and helping disseminate invitations to their support groups and their networks. But we were also very conscious of presenting results and findings back. So presenting results back to support groups, and our consumers will be involved as co-authors in our journal articles. We're still writing those, and also our conference presentations. Next slide. Now that we've designed the Bro Support Portal, it's now going through this user experience session. So we've got 6 user experience sessions with consumers who are going through the web page and again, piloting, providing feedback, having the first go at it, and now it's being piloted with consumers. And all throughout, they're able to provide feedback and tell us, is this working? Is it hitting the mark? Is it relevant? Which is invaluable. And finally, we are evaluating. So closing off our project cycle, we provided an evaluation plan, but very much this was something that was then again presented to our consumers on our advisory committee and Katrina Lewis from Alfred Health to provide feedback on very key aspects across that evaluation plan. How do we recruit? How do we engage consumers? What's the best methods of doing that? Is survey? Is it interviews? Is it focus groups? What type of ways should we be engaging? And so you can see the evaluation aims, and it's also about, well, what outcomes would be important for these consumers for us to be measuring. So this is just a photo from one of our co-design workshops just to show you, and we had about 39 consumers participate in our 6 co-design workshops, so they participated in each one, and it was extraordinary. So a big thank you to them, because we wouldn't have been able to develop up this portal without them. So I'm now going to hand over to Sarah.
Great, thank you, Dash, and hello everyone. I'm Sarah Carmody, so I'm the project manager looking after consumer and community involvement at Monash Partners. So I'm going to take you through some of the things that we've found is helpful and works, and that we've tried around using technology for consumer and community involvement. And I guess I'd like to start out by saying I don't think that I'm particularly an expert, and prior to, well, this time last year, I certainly hadn't used Zoom a lot for my work. And I think it's just a matter of that we've tried a lot of things and kept a priority to make sure that we're looking at different options and being creative with how we do consumer and community involvement, that we've tried a lot of different things in the past 10 or so months. And so with having more of a mandate or a need to do consumer and community involvement and working online, I think that's created both an opportunity and some challenges. So we're just going to talk through some of those things. So I guess it's important to start with saying that researchers, health professionals and consumers alike, everybody's using online technology, but everyone's at different stages and has different confidence for using these different online tools. So I think that's something to take into account, and with a bit of creativity and support, we can create some online opportunities and do some really great consumer and community involvement work. So when planned and used well, online technology can be a great opportunity to connect with people wherever they are. So it's especially beneficial for people who can't attend your regular workshops or meetings in person. So it can reduce travel costs and time. And not only that, you can actually start to reach people beyond the sort of traditional, maybe an hour or so. You can start to access more people that are further out or in different states that you normally wouldn't be able to doing in-person consumer and community involvement. So you can provide real-time interaction and feedback. So using Zoom or using Microsoft Teams, you can discuss things and get feedback in a lot quicker ways. You can have a 10-minute conversation. You can have a 1-hour workshop like what we're doing today, where people can fit things in a lot easier than if you had to travel to get there. You can also document discussion, activities and responses using online technology. And that's what I think one of the biggest benefits that we found is being able to access people and work with people that we wouldn't usually, because we geography is not we're not limited by travel and distance. We can reach a whole range of people. And with our technology, we can also document things. So we can save our Zoom chats, we can record our meetings. We have a range of different technology programs where you can do online sticky notes. So we can have a whole range of opportunities that make it a lot easier to document the work that we're doing and to keep those notes and records. So there's lots of different types of technology, and I guess you're only sort of limited by your imagination. And I think the thing that we've done is, in the past 10 or so months, is tried a whole range of different tools to see what works. And there's some things that work in different situations, some that work better than others. So we've got virtual meetings. So I guess that's just replicating the meetings and bringing people together. Chats and calls, so you can use Zoom, and I think Zoom's what we have predominantly used the most, but also Skype and Google Meets. And Google is a great online sort of freely available platform for a lot of people. Then you've got collaborative workspaces, so you can start to work with people in a more interactive, regular way. We can share documents and make documents available for comments and feedback. The other program that we've used and had a lot of success with is Mural, which you can see the picture there where there's all these online sticky notes. So Mural is an online sticky note board, and you provide people with a link to a web link, and they click on the web link and it opens up a page. And once you can set some questions and people type in and place sticky notes into that. So Mural then saves that as a PDF document for you, and you've got that to take away. So we found that to be a really great brainstorming and planning tool, and it has allowed for a lot of interaction. Also really great to save and to go back to those notes later. And in terms of research and analysing some of the information that comes back, you can then pop that into NVivo or other analysis programs, which has been really helpful. Then you've got some of your other special features programs. Once we've done our brainstorming workshops, which we've used in our early co-design workshops with some of our projects. We've then moved into using more voting and decision-making programs like Poll Everywhere and Mentimeter and Kahoots, where you can start to look at different decision-making options. So you can say, do you like this option or that option? And people can vote and pop in comments. And the great thing with a lot of these tools where you've got Poll Everywhere and Kahoots is you can have a free version where you use the program up to a certain capacity. So you might be able to have 5 or 6 questions, surveys that you can use for free. And Mural has a 12-month free subscription for education providers. So a lot of this technology is increasingly accessible and not too expensive. And you can also use just traditional email. We've had some really good feedback and working with researchers and linking in with consumers with our consumer advisory committee, where researchers have provided us with examples of evaluation surveys that they wanted to get feedback on. And so we emailed those out to consumers and got feedback that way. So I guess you can use your technology as sophisticated or as simple as meets your needs. Now, as I'm going through, feel free, if you've got other technology programs and tools that you've used that you find helpful, please pop them in the chat. We're always looking for examples of new and fantastic programs. So some of the different technology features, so we've got virtual meetings, webinars, working on shared documents, whiteboards. So basically anything that you can do in a physical space, we can try and replicate that in the online environment. Quizzes, chat groups, all of those things, and which I've mentioned before. So I'll move through that one. The other thing I think that's really important with technology is thinking about how people will be accessing it. And so with a lot of these programs, you can access on the computer, phone, and tablet. Programs like Zoom also allow you to use Zoom, the usual one, you can use emotions. So if you're talking about different concepts and ideas, you can do a thumbs up, thumbs down, smile emoji, raise your hand, and all those sorts of things. So you can create a really interactive space. So some tips and things that we found important for online consumer and community involvement. So it's important to consider the type of internet that people have access to. So some of these programs, and if people are having trouble with internet, then maybe you need to be able to provide an option where people can turn off their camera or use Zoom webinar or just use a chat function. Check in with the needs of your group and the people that you're working with. So sometimes it's really helpful just saying, have you used Zoom before? Do you feel comfortable? Would you like to do a practice run, or is there some information that I can send to you that will sort of give you some instructions of how to get started? Create ways for people to feel comfortable. So in the same way that we would run a face-to-face in-person workshop where you would greet people at the door and say, hi, how are you going? And you do some icebreakers and warm-up activities. We want to create those sorts of same environments online. So jumping online earlier before most people get on, and as people arrive saying, hi, how are you going? And thinking of some different icebreaker activities can be really helpful and make people feel comfortable. And also allow different ways for people to participate. So sometimes in some of the Zoom workshops that we've run, you'll have people who have their cameras on and they're talking and they're responding, they're putting things in the chat as well. But you'll have other people with cameras off, maybe popping some comments in the chat to share with everyone. Some people will just feel comfortable in providing feedback and comments to individual people privately in the chat. So just thinking that there's a whole range of ways people can participate, and that all those differences are okay. And the more we can sort of plan for it and just let people know that it is okay to participate in the ways they feel comfortable. Providing an agenda beforehand can make it, or an overview of what's going to happen, can help people feel comfortable, and outlining what's going to take place. Arrive, I mentioned before, arrive early. Also really helpful to have extra person, and this is sort of with Zoom and online workshops, to have an extra person or people to monitor the chat and help people, anyone who's having a bit of trouble with the technology, and allowing time for the introductions and housekeeping. Also great to follow up with people afterwards to share outcomes and get that feedback. Okay, and just last couple of slides to finish up on the technology that we've used. So in 2020, fair to say that all of our consumer and community involvement work was done online. And so we established a consumer advisory committee, a COVID-19 committee, which worked all online. We facilitated our consumer advisory committee training online, and hosted consumer and co-design workshops. And some of those co-design workshops were across Australia that we were planning to go to in person, but we delivered all online, and provide us with some really great benefits that we could reach a whole lot more people than we would have face to face. Worked with consumers to review surveys. We've done that via email, and also via what we've called Think Aloud interviews, where we reviewed and had a look at surveys online via Zoom, getting consumer feedback. Used a lot of the program which we called Mural. So Dash might be able to pop up the link for Mural there, and you can have a look at that. So Mural is the online sticky note program, and that's worked really well for us for brainstorming and planning. Zoom chat's been great as well to get feedback when you're having a meeting, get people to pop their ideas and thoughts and reflections into Zoom chat. You can save the chat. Poll Everywhere has been really good for voting and helping make decisions on different designs and ideas and where to go in projects. And then Zoom Webinar, as we're seeing today. And we also have, as Angela mentioned, our online researcher and health professional consumer and community involvement support service, where people can register via our website and talk about the types of consumer and community involvement work that they're looking to do, and we support them through either Zoom meetings, email interaction, phone call. So we also have, just to finish up, our technology tip sheet. So if you go to our website into the consumer and community involvement section, we have a whole range of technology tip sheets there with links to useful YouTube videos, and each of the tip sheets outline the different functions that the programs have. And we're looking to build those up in the coming months. So if you have ideas of other tip sheets that would be really useful for you in your work, please let us know. Okay, and that's me with the technology. Have other people got examples of technology that you've used? I think I've seen a few coming through on the chat there.
Sarah, someone's mentioned Basecamp for collaboration,
Yep.
and also pointed out that it has a free 12 months access if you work in the education space. So that might be relevant to anyone who's affiliated with a university. Also, someone was interested in the cycle that Dash presented, that highlights the various stages of a project where you would seek to involve consumers and community members. And we've just put the link. There's information about that research and project cycle in our online consumer and community involvement resources. So the link to that page is there in the chat with a few different examples, as well as the link to further information about Mural as well. One of our activities this year has been co-designing a national consumer and community involvement knowledge hub. So I might not have mentioned at the beginning, but Monash Partners is accredited by the NHMRC as an Advanced Health Research Translation Centre, and there are 9 other centres and a number of people from those centres joining us today. And we've been working together to co-design what a central repository or place for consumer and community involvement resources and networking and support might look like. And so we ran a whole series of co-design workshops across the year, and obviously we have plans to do those face-to-face, but those plans were all put aside and we did them all online with Zoom and with Mural and various other tools. And the feedback that we had from everybody who participated was that they were very engaging and a really positive experience for most people. So I guess we didn't have any particular expertise when we started out, but we've just tried various things and built up our experience in these various platforms, especially over the last year. Thanks to those of you who are interested in our resources, please make use of them. And there's a request there for a list of different CCI terms. I think that information is embedded in the module, so we can perhaps post a link through to those as well. Dash and Sandy, anything you'd want to add also at this point in response to the chat?
The list of terms probably isn't on site. Some of them are, but if they email me directly, I'm more than happy to share that with them.
Great. Sandy, perhaps you could pop your email address into the chat. Would that
Good
be
idea.
okay? Or the Monash Partners CCI email address would also be fine.
Are you able to do that, please, Sarah? Thank you.
And there's a question there about perhaps also if we could pop into the chat where the technology tip sheets can be accessed, Sarah, on the Monash Partners website. And just to reassure everybody that these resources are freely available to anybody. You don't need to be a member of one of our organisations. Anybody can access them at any time. Sarah's just put in there the email address to contact the Monash Partners Consumer and Community Involvement team, and we'll follow up with the link to the tip sheets as well.
So I just also noticed that we've got a hand raised from Barbara Latham. I'm just going to unmute you, Barbara, if you wanted to ask a question. Is that okay? Did you have a question, Barbara? Oh, you might have to unmute yourself. Here we go. did you have a question, Barbara?
No, sorry, I inadvertently pushed the button.
No dramas at all. Okay. Anyone else have any other questions that you wanted to put in the chat, or raise your hand and we can come unmute you? We have all the power as panelists. So Kate, yeah, Kate has a question around offline proposals. So we have a research advice form, which I'll get Sarah it's a CCI advice form, which I'll get Sarah to put the link in as well. And so if you've got a project you're getting started, or have a grant application that you're going to be putting in and you'd want some feedback or advice from us as a CCI team, feel free to fill that out or email us, and we will set up either a meeting or an email conversation to work out how to assist you. So please, we're here to support you and link you in with resources. And also, if you need to engage with our Consumer Advisory Committee, who were our COVID-19 committee, who have now transitioned into our Monash Partners Consumer Advisory Committee, please feel free to let us know, because we can also organise that.
Also, just a question that's come through is, from a vulnerable cohort perspective, can you make some comments around how we can mitigate the need to have true representation on committees, boards, yet often our patients may not be appropriately articulate, just a general inquiry.
So Sharon,
Josh, would you have some comments?
Yeah, Sharon, that's a really great question. I don't think there's always a one-size-fits-all approach to that. And Sandy, also feel free to jump in. But one of the things that I've learned through doing this work is sometimes to also ask your consumer members and your community members what support that you could offer them, and how best to offer that support to allow them to participate and be part of those boards or committees. For quite a few of the committees that we've set up, we generally will either have more than one consumer. Having a few in the committee can be really helpful, but also having a support person or one of us sitting next to them to kind of be able to be a little bit of a broker sometimes between what's happening, because it can be a little bit chaotic. I would also say that providing training to committee members to understand how to work and engage meaningfully with consumers can be something that would be really important, and also providing training for your consumers. So I wouldn't say it's a one-size-fits-all, but Sandy, did you have anything else to add to that?
I'll probably only that perhaps maybe there's other ways for them to be involved in other activities than necessarily just through a committee or a board that is less taxing, or not as much of a big commitment, or potentially through a different medium, as Sarah's spoken through today, that might lessen the burden somewhat.
Absolutely. I think to be thinking about many different ways for consumers to engage is really a terrific way to approach it, and to think about, you know, what support you can provide to the consumer so they can really engage in a way that's appropriate for them, and to, I guess, have a bit of a flexible approach around that, as Dash has highlighted, I think is really, really important. Another question that's come through, which I think is an interesting one here: how can you get consumers involved in more obtuse projects, like developing a research strategy for part of a health service? A really, really great question. I think it's so important that in health services, that voice of consumers comes through really strongly. I guess sometimes it's about finding a consumer who's the right fit for that type of opportunity, who could participate and contribute. Dash and Sandy, would you like to add anything more to that one?
I'd be thinking about pretty wide and varied recruitment strategies to get hold of the particular person that you're thinking you might need, from, you know, all sorts of different methods of advertising to signs in, you know, hospital areas or outpatient departments, to you know, more traditional ways of recruiting through community organisations, going to hospital patient experience officers and linking potentially into through their resources, Consumer Health Forum advertise free if you have an appropriate job description for them. I would just be thinking of lots and lots of wide and varied recruitment strategies to find that person.
Thanks, Sandy. Dash, anything to add?
Yeah, I think everything that Sandy said as well. So probably not much more to add there. And I think it's also interesting in terms of, you know, there's quite a few people, I mean, I'm in that category as well, who I am a consumer, I'm involved in being hospitalised, I see a lot of health professionals. And so you might also see, can you recruit consumers who may potentially have a little bit of research literacy or potentially have a little bit more experience, and so they might be able to bring both hats, but also training up consumers can help them be involved in those types of activities. So, but more than happy, Deborah, to have conversations about that with you offline as well, if you'd like some more detailed information on how you could do that. I think there was also something around reimbursements, and so I'm just trying to find our reimbursement sheet, Sarah, to put in the...
Yep, I'll grab it.
Okay. There's also not a one-size-fits-all around consumer reimbursement, so I might throw to Sandy, who's done a bit of work in that area as well.
Yeah, so there's certainly recommendations for involvement, but also acknowledgement that not everybody always has a budget for this. So certainly looking at ways for researchers to write budgets in. But I think re-looking at your question, it's actually more about that remuneration, which depending on the level of engagement, we stage the remuneration amount based on how involved or engaged the consumer is in a particular project, as well as looking at other ways of remunerating consumers. Sometimes they don't want payment, sometimes vouchers are more appropriate. Sometimes they're happy to not even have that, but it's always worth a discussion. Sometimes there's tax implications when people are paid, especially if they're receiving some sort of disability kind of allowances. So it's often a very individual negotiation with each person on the most appropriate way to do it, but there's certainly guidance out there.
There's also just a question from Caroline, working in a laboratory type setting around engaging consumers in that research, which, as you point out, Caroline, is often preclinical and doesn't involve patients. Increasingly, we've got a number of researchers from those areas reaching out to us for support, and there are some examples of some really terrific ways of doing that, whereby you potentially buddy up a consumer with a research group working in a lab-based setting. And the feedback that we've had from a number of the lab-based researchers is that they just find it invaluable to connect with someone who has the lived experience of the condition, which perhaps ultimately their preclinical research might contribute to in the future. So if you wanted to make contact with us, we'd be delighted to help you with some in developing that up further. Dash or Sandy, anything more to add on that one?
Probably not more than you said, other than often, as you said, a model that works is partnering up with just a couple of people who have lived experience and really sort of working and developing those relationships. You know, consumer advisory committees don't fit every single condition here, or if that's not working, sometimes if there is a community organisation that's involved with that particular health issue that the scientist is addressing, sometimes you can actually work through them with their community and consumer base that they already have. So there's a few different strategies, but it's often great to personalise it when we're a bit more aware of what it is exactly that the scientist wants to achieve from the engagement.
Just given our time, I'm just wondering, while we respond to some of these questions, Sarah, if you might just pop up the next slide. And I can appreciate that a number of you will need to go to other meetings, but we would just be really keen to hear your feedback on this seminar today. Sarah will pop the link through to a very brief survey into the chat. And if you had a couple of moments now while we're online to complete it, that would be terrific. We'll take the information that you provide to us to strengthen and build on this program as we move forward throughout the year. So we'd really appreciate your help with that one. There's a question there around, does anyone have experience in involving consumers in deciding what clinical trials should be conducted at a site? Which I think is a really, really terrific, terrific question, isn't it? Dash or Sandy, any comments on that question?
I don't know if I have it in terms of what clinical trials should be conducted at a site. I've gone the other way of working out which sites a clinical trial should be conducted at and seeking consumer advice that way. But Leanne, leave it with us. We might be able to get some information around that. Sandy, do you have any experience in that?
I wouldn't say I have experience, but I certainly know people who have, and it might be one of those occasions that we're best to link you in with people that have significant expert knowledge in this area.
So Leanne, email us and we'll get back to you.
Simone, in answer to your question, we will make the presentation, we'll circulate the slides to everybody who's attended today, and we'll also make the presentation available on our website shortly, so you'll be able to access that at any time. Just allow you all a couple of minutes just to complete that survey. And certainly there's a question from Linda about providing support to develop a consumer and community involvement plan for, to support a project. Certainly, Linda, we could definitely help with that if you please make contact with us.
Lovely reference someone's posted there as well about assisting basic science researchers to involve consumers. So thank you for that.
Terrific. Thank you, everyone. I'd like to thank my colleagues. It's been terrific presenting with you today. And also just thank you all for joining us online. We look forward to your feedback. Just to highlight the upcoming seminars. So in March, we have Gabrielle Brand from Monash University, and Gabrielle's going to present on a research approach for co-designing education programs with healthcare consumers, and she has enormous experience in this area. In April, some consumer leads from our health service partner organisations will be presenting on the approaches they've taken to setting up consumer advisory committees in their particular organisations. And a really interesting topic in May with Rhonda Garrard from Monash University talking about navigating power imbalances in consumer and community involvement, which is certainly something that we need to be really mindful of. So we're just coming up to 2 o'clock. I just wanted to say thank you to you all. All of our resources are available online via our website, and you can also contact us directly via our cci@monashpartners.org.au email address. Please reach out if we can support you in any way. We'd be really happy to do so. And otherwise, we look forward to seeing many of you in about a month's time. And thanks so much for joining us today.